Hello everyone, I'm Ron Ansano. Welcome to NECTA 2019. This year's theme is Big Moves, and as always, we're joined by an august panel within our industry to talk about some of the changes taking place, not only in cable, but in the communications world around us. Of course, with me today, as always, in fact, probably 15 of the last 20 years, is David Cohen. Of course, is a senior vice president, executive vice president, I should say, at Comcast Corporation, holds multiple jobs there, including being my boss, which we discuss every year. Contract's just about up, so we'll be having a conversation. No, quite the opposite. Also with me is Jennifer Hightower. She is Senior Vice President and General Counsel at Cox Communications, and Sean McGrail, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of NECN. Please welcome them to the stage. So David, before we do the deep dive, just as we often do every year, kind of get a high-level 50,000-foot view of where we are in the industry. Much has happened since we last spoke a year ago, whether it's new services that are coming OTT, whether it's a consolidation in the industry that continues apace, whether it's new technologies. All of this is in front of us still, and yet it's been something we've also been talking about since we started these conversations way back when.
Yeah. Well, I have always been the glass half full guy. I love our position as an industry, both on the operator side and on the content provision side. And I think the past year has demonstrated that resiliency and the power of our businesses. I think on the operator side, we have all been transitioning a little bit away from video as the lifeblood and the way in which we want to measure our businesses to what we at Comcast call connectivity, which is really our high-speed data businesses. And I think all of the companies in the business have crossed that intersection where high-speed data is now a larger contributor of customers, of profitability, of revenues than video is. And I think that although we deserve credit for doing that, a lot of that has just been driven by the reality of the competitive world in which we're functioning. And it has positioned us incredibly well in this new world of multiple streaming options for content. And on the content side, I think that as you said, or as Jen said in the introductory remarks, I mean, there has been consolidation, which is what we've talked about for the last 2 years on this panel. But that consolidation has really positioned the content players in our industry incredibly well. And I must say, I think the big winner of this, and this is a joke, I actually am sick enough actually listen to last year's panel every year. And although we didn't do our usual question of what's going to change in the year, we did talk about the fact that with this consolidation, the content and operator sides of our businesses, we're going to be very well positioned to be able to deliver more and more content to our customers that our customers want in a variety of formats and through a variety of platforms. And that is exactly what has happened, and I think it speaks to the incredible health, the vitality, and the growth prospects of our industry.
So Jennifer, with that though, I mean, David describing kind of maybe less emphasis on video as far as the businesses are concerned, but as far as the public is concerned, that's all anyone is concerned with, is just how much video is coming. And whether it's OTC services, whether you're now going to watch your phone vertically rather than horizontally, right. You know, everybody's getting ready for an entirely new world and an onslaught of video programming, if you will, or snippets or bytes or little pieces, however you want to characterize these things that are coming at us. It's going to be a deluge in the relatively near future, if it's not already.
You're definitely right. I mean, when you think about video in the sense of OTT, the marketplace it's amazingly competitive. I mean, and it's going to become even more so with Peacock, with Apple TV, with Disney having its own channel, with Warner Channel, HBO. I mean, there is no question in the OTT space it's incredibly competitive. It's also very competitive in the operator space in the sense of the true linear lineup. That still is a relevant space. I think video is always going to be something that at least Cox will stay engaged with because there are customers who really do want the consolidation of the product. But the reality also, David said it, true, broadband is, I mean, internet is a service everyone has to have. It's an essential service. So we are very committed to expanding our portfolio of services, but we're always going to stay in the video space because we love those loyal customers who want that premium video product.
And Sean, that's your world, right? I mean, you're in the video world, period. I mean, at NESN.
Right.
So there's also been a proliferation of offerings in the sports space that, in some ways, is mind-boggling. I mean, you've got high school football teams now getting contracts for programming, which is, had that happened when I was playing in my day.
John might have been a whole different career.
Could have been a whole different thing. I mean, listen, like John Elway was playing across the street from my house. I was playing at a small Catholic school, same position, same number. He stole all my press. It was a horrible experience. And nothing.
And you're not bitter.
I'm not bitter at all.
Good.
You could be in a Jets uniform right now.
But I mean, everywhere you look. I mean, from us at Comcast and NBC Universal,
Sure.
we've got our own channels, the FS1s, carrying some of the games that used to reside on larger networks. It's a radically different landscape.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the landscape is changing rapidly. So, for any network or distributor, and especially an independent network, it's even more challenging to figure out how you can access every distribution platform, how you get into every home that would desire your content. And especially with what's going on inside the bundles and some of the, churn we're seeing inside the business. Even though the churn rates from what I've seen recently haven't been markedly different than in years gone by, at least some things I saw from Leishman Group, but the acquisition rate's down. So if we're not going to have those homes, the question is, how do we get into those homes and how do we service them, and give them the content they want without alienating the core business or impacting the core business? So I think you see a lot of networks trying to figure that piece out of how do they go either direct to consumer or in skinnier bundles that appeal to consumers who aren't signing up for traditional video packages. So that's a challenge. And then on the other side, there's a lot of new technology opportunities. We're building out the first UHD plant in the country right now, and continuing to invest heavily in the business. So all kinds of exciting technologies to bring consumers new products and bring them really closer to the action than they've ever been. And then new opportunities, I think, even in programming, like sports wagering, which I think we'll talk about later.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, along with the legalization of marijuana. So we're going to talk about all that
Great. Let's get to
simultaneously,
both.
because there's nothing like.
They may be related.
Yeah, they will be related, absolutely. If you guys really want to make money,
So Ron, I wanted to follow up on something that Jennifer said, which is, and then Sean focused on it too, which is none of us is writing off video. I think it's a matter of a pursuit of profitable video as opposed to unprofitable video. And technology is such an enabler here,
Right.
Which is what Sean just mentioned. So I happen to have the right two U.S. cable companies here, both using our X1 interface, which provides our customers with the ability to access not only the traditional cable bundle and traditional cable networks, but also to access Netflix and YouTube and Amazon Prime, all through the X1 platform and through the Emmy Award-winning voice remote. So we're trying to make it easier for our customers to get to the content that they want through the use of technology.
So let me ask
And
you.
I was sitting in a presentation in New York.
Yes.
So Sean, you'll like this. So I don't remember the name of the company, but I can figure it out. But it is a startup company that is, the technology is for like iPhones at high school football games, that you use iPhones to take video of the high school football games, and it gets packaged to be able to broadcast. So you don't need a crew on site. It's user generated.
It's video call
and they edit it into the ability to carry high school football games, which can be on PEG channels or could be in an over-the-top service, to be able to have high school football games available for broadcast, narrow or broad. And that's another use of technology to give people content, some people content, that they might really be interested in.
So Jennifer, we're talking about even more fractionalization, if you will, of the streams. We haven't done a quick update yet on where we stand with respect to sub-losses and things like that. Is that noticeably accelerated, noticeably slowed down, held the same? Where does the MSO world sit right now when it comes to holding on to subs?
So it's a great question. I mean, I think it is, unfortunately, of course it's still ongoing, but I would say it's not at the same rate as it was before. At least for Cox's perspective, we definitely have slowed the loss. We haven't changed it where we don't have the loss, but we have definitely slowed the loss, which we are, which is so obviously the goal. And we're specifically looking to see how to bundle to keep more customers, but there's no question the growth really still is on the broadband side. We're continuing to increase customers on that side and or the other products that we would launch, like security or home automation. The video business is a tough business because there are so many competitors. Cord cutting is definitely still something that's real, but the reality is cord cutting reaches for a certain type of market, and if you want the ease of the service, you're not going to be a cord cutter. If you want the whole package, I think the reality also is the more folks buy the one-off products, at some point the price is going to change to the point that it's going to make you want to come back to the cable company. But I say that being a person who works for the cable company, so I hope I'm right.
David, I'm going to come back to you on that because we've spoken about this on numerous occasions, that eventually if you're going to do Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, Apple Plus, Peacock, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime.
You're spending $150 a month on video.
Yeah, and still need a basic cable or you need the carrier.
Only if you want to watch football.
Right, yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, it's...
Yeah.
So what, I mean, when do people, I mean, and I've had an argument, Rich Greenfield at PTIG, he and I argue about this all the time on Twitter, actually, which is yet another service that delivers information to your home seamlessly.
Over a broadband connection.
Over a broadband connection, exactly. But there is this issue of, at what point does your bundling cost more than the original bundle?
Yeah, so I think that's a relevant question, and it's interesting. We've really we as a company and we as an industry have really tried to get people to focus less on video subscriber losses because it's not really the way we're running our company. So at Comcast, we try and count customer relationships, which is video, high-speed data, home security. It's our and our cell phone service. So our customer relationship number continues to grow and to grow substantially. We just did our third quarter earnings, and we went through our third quarter earnings call, did not get a single question on video losses. It was all about customer relationships. And frankly, the whole call was about broadband because we had a knockout quarter on broadband. So I think, and by the way, it's not a public relations point I'm making. I think if you really want to understand the way our businesses are working today, the way our businesses will work in the future, you should be focused more on broadband and not on the loss of low-end, unprofitable video subscribers, which are the video subscribers we're all losing.
That's true.
And so I think that's a healthy turning point for our industry and one that is going to serve us well as we move forward in the years ahead.
So Sean, as a network, how do you make yourself stand out in this wide array of offerings? And obviously there's a community focus with respect to your network that's integral to what's going on, regionally, locally. But still, you have to maintain a value proposition amid this clutter.
Well, and I think, you hit it right on the head. The networks that drive real numbers, and again, this isn't chest thumping. We were number one for the last 6 months in a row. We're traditionally the highest rated cable network in New England over, a more than a decade-long period. So delivering content that's, important to consumers is key to being successful. And I think some of the stronger networks, the sports networks and others, continue to drive significant numbers in adhesion, to the bundle. So I think all of that's been good. To David's point, as companies decide to shed less profitable cable subs, the question, or satellite subs, how do we still connect with those as a network, right? As these numbers ebb down a little bit, we have to find a way to offset. If you're a programmer, and the NBC side would be saying the exact same thing. How do we augment and backfill to those consumers who aren't going to take a traditional package, yet we'd like to sell our services to them? And I think that's a real conundrum, and we're going to have to work that out collectively so that the industry continues to do well on video, but networks find new ways and new content and new avenues to distribute their content. We've been fortunate. We've spent a lot of time in the digital world, launched a reasonably successful digital site. I think it's top 15 in the country on sports, and managed to gain footholds with most OTT distributors. And I think the other point, we talked about technology. As we continue to build out and develop, more, UHD and 4K content, UHD more than 4K, how do we get that content in the home at a bandwidth where it's actually producing an outstanding signal? So across our delivery platforms that we work with, we have people delivering at 3 megs into the home, and we have people delivering at 15 or 18 or 20 megs into the home if they're using a high-speed data connection. And if you're distributing a 4K signal to that plant, the differences in those signals between being compressed 5 to 7 times and virtually uncompressed is remarkably different. So I think as an industry, we're all going to have to collectively work to figure out, how do we deliver the best quality product in every package and in every bundle to satisfy consumers.
Jennifer, let me ask you about shedding, as David described it, less profitable or unprofitable subs. And that in a certain sense, in this context of this conversation, it's one thing to discuss it. In another sense, in the public realm, it becomes a bit of a PR issue and maybe even a regulatory issue down the road with respect to universal access to programming. So how do you square that circle when it comes to, obviously what's right for the business versus what's right for at least what regulators and legislators may think what's right for the consumer?
No, it's a very fair question. I mean, it really is a public policy issue. I do think Cox looks at different low lifeline type programs for customers, even in the video space, but it's something that is challenging because the reality is the business is expensive, and you have to work on making sure that you're providing the services that work for the consumer base that also enables the business to continue to grow. I think one of the ways we'll have to do it is we're going to have to continue to ensure that we have a variety of package offerings. You also have to have different packages. We're not able to have as many packages as we used to have, so we have different tiers of packaging that are at different price points to help ensure that we're hitting all the different customer demands.
So David, we've had that conversation for as long as I've been doing this, the tiering of cable offerings. And so we're back to it again, it seems, that we have these questions of, what's affordable, what's available, what's right for different groups of people. And is that just going to be the reality going forward? As much as we thought we were getting away from it at one juncture in the life cycle, it's still ever present.
So I don't know that we ever thought we were getting away from it. I think that packaging of services for a long time was a way of growing our business. You start with the triple play.
I was there for that. Yes.
You couldn't find a company that wasn't offering its home telephone service, which for cable was basically a throwaway, that we would effectively put into a bundle for free, and then high-speed data and video, and then within video, multiple levels of packages to enable us to move the price point around. I think what has happened is, and this is, look, I represent a company that is on the content side as well as the operator side, so I'm not making a negative comment here, but the cost of programming, particularly sports programming and broadcast programming, under the pressure of competition on the operator side and competition on the programming side, has created more difficult choices for distributors that are trying to appeal to customers with an affordable product. I mean, all of us, not some of us, but all of us went to charging a broadcast TV fee and a regional sports net fee so we could advertise a $89.95 2-product bundle or 3-product bundle with, oh, by the way, $40 of add-on charges for regional sports nets and broadcast TV.
Sean, you're laughing.
Well,
that's your $40.
No, but it's, and again, this is not, I think this is the way we're struggling as an ecosystem to figure out how to carry the regional sports nets like NESN and how to pay for the retransmission consent fees, and to do it in a way that is transparent to our customers and still enable us to compete against the satellite providers and against overbuilders like RCN, WOW, et cetera, with a sticker price for our basic cable service that still looks competitive. But this is an evolving world. I mean, this is not, we're like not done now. And when I talk about not chasing unprofitable subscribers, I'm not saying we're not going to offer products to them. I'm saying we're not going to keep cutting the price to them so that we lose money on everyone that we sell.
But you'll make it up on volume.
Yeah, right, exactly. And what we'll do is we'll continue to sell the product and the bundle and the package at a price that makes sense for us, even if that accelerates the number of customers who are not going to buy the service because it's just too expensive. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know whether 3 years from now or 5 years from now, when there are 15 substantial streaming services, and people realize that if they buy every one of those streaming services, that in fact they're going to be paying more than they would have been paying if they went back to the original bundle that cable provided to them. And so I think this is a time where we're trying to be more thoughtful and stable in the offerings that we're doing, and we're less worried about the potential loss of video customers at the part of the cycle where, in order to attract them and to keep them, we'd have to lower the price and make the service unprofitable to us.
Sean, let me go to you on with respect to sports rights. I mean, because obviously we're coming up on a couple of different events in the next few years with respect to collective bargaining agreements in various sports. That means prices go up, broadly speaking, because athletes will be compensated more, different codicils that go with those various agreements, and that all falls back to you. And so then it becomes a question of price for both regional and national sports services. Where do you see that going? Is there no end to what, on the one hand, customers are willing to pay for a full complement of sports that they're very close to, but is there a breaking point at some juncture where it just, the entire proposition becomes uneconomical?
Well, I do think, I mean, and it's no mystery, we've all said this, the products that drive the largest audiences are the most costly content, right? And I think 6 of the top 10 viewed events in the United States this year were sports events. Again, we are routinely #1 in prime in our market. So yes, but that doesn't mean there isn't a cost issue. And I think the cost-value relationship is really challenged at this point, especially with basic cable and expanded basic cable. More so when you have other products selling at very low price points, well below their cost. So you have a lot of OTT distributors in the market selling for half of the cost. And I do wonder, because that's an unprofitable proposition, and they are certainly losing money on every subscriber. You have Netflix at a $8 to $12 price point, offering a lot of content, and it seems to be resetting the public's impression of what video services are worth. So that's a challenge.
And they spent $15 billion on content last year.
And they spent $15 billion on content. So, I mean, these are high-quality services. But I do think, again, at the core services and packages have to be ones that drive real numbers and drive real audience. The ones that don't drive real numbers and audience, I think, are, frankly, a bigger part of the issue. And not to pick on niche networks, because most of them are great. But if you're not driving real ratings performance, and if you're not bringing people to the television on a regular basis, I think those price points would be under high pressure, more so than people who are delivering very large audiences every night. But sports is very expensive, the content is expensive, and naturally, hopefully the performance is there to sustain long-term the value inside those bundles and other platforms.
So Jennifer,
I want to,
yeah, go ahead.
I want to pose what might sound like an academic question, but I think it's actually a real question. And this is an issue that late Senator Arlen Specter actually fastened onto, which is, what is the cause and effect of the cycle that you talked about? That is, collective bargaining agreements coming up, players are going to want more money. Is it just driven within the ecosystem of sports, or does the availability of regional sports networks being distributed on basic cable and of mega telephone contracts on broadcast and cable networks driving an ever-increasing, potentially something that is viewed as a limitless pot of money? Mm-hmm. And Arlen Specter's question was that if you didn't have the potential of unlimited amounts of money for television broadcast fees, whether that might not be the right way to break the cycle of new collective bargaining agreements that are driving up the sports programming costs that the leagues and the teams are generating as a result of that. So the question he was posing in his day was, where do you break the cycle? Can you break the
has to break
cycle?
somewhere. It has
Right,
to
you
break
have to
somewhere.
break the cycle somewhere.
It cannot go on the way
Jennifer,
it
let me
is.
follow up about that because it can, at least it has. So if you go back to 1980 or 1979, whenever cable really launched, and there was the notion that this proliferation of channels, some of which were, in fact, all of which were unprofitable in the beginning, the MSOs themselves, or even the individual carriers at the time, when we were going kind of system by system, were borrowing huge amounts of money through the junk bond market, financing unprofitable enterprises, and ultimately they became wildly profitable. We then had cross subsidies where if you're on the programming side, you were getting your sub fees, you're getting some advertising, and then we had a proliferation of channels, however many it is now, 500, 600, some would argue still nothing to watch in some instances, but no one's willing to give that up, and everybody's still paying for it. So is this analogous to 1980, where we're just going to have another explosion of content, and people will access it however they will? David knows this. We've used the Insana children as examples over the last many years of how content is consumed. They're watching it on their phone, they're watching it on an iPad, they're watching it on a computer. They're show specific, they're not network specific. Doesn't matter if it's a meme that's funny, they share it amongst themselves. Wild, different approaches to absorbing and consuming content with seemingly a limitless appetite, assuming that, of course, Dad has an unlimited budget.
Right.
But still, that's the
You want to
assumption
be
that
in your
people.
family is what we're all about. Yes, yes.
But it hasn't gone away. We haven't
Yeah.
reverted back to some old number of viable channels. Everything's still there.
That's a very fair point. I mean, no, I don't think we're going to go back to a number of channels. I think the content is going to continue to proliferate in multiple forums. I think the generations that we're raising now, you said it exactly right. They're not tied to any station. They're not tied to any network. They're tied to whatever's of interest to them. But I do think at some point the cycle, it's a fair point. When is it going to happen? I can't answer that question. But the cycle we're in now is not sustainable, or it's not sustainable in the video model the way it is today. The content cost is just, it's ridiculously expensive with sometimes the way the contracts are negotiated today. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
It's the contract cycle and the way we're living today is not sustainable for the operator model, which means we will do more over the top. We'll do we will have less linear content, or there'll have to be some type of change to the pricing, because I do think you'll also see more and more pricing, like David referenced, the broadcast surcharge fee, the sports fee. I think there will definitely be more broken out fees. As long as it's transparent to the consumer, then the consumer can decide if they want to have that pricing or not, because otherwise the operators can't afford to purchase the content.
Yeah, and David, as disruptive as cable was to broadcast by bringing the overall cost of production down, I think at one juncture, CNBC itself had the single lowest cost per hour of production in the entire news business, where that model became obviously wildly profitable. When you look at digital and when you look at OTT, it's clear that even though Netflix and Amazon and Apple and Hulu are going to spend billions of dollars on original content, there are going to be some low-cost providers of high-quality content, as you mentioned, the iPhone, now with 3 cameras where you can shoot actually a pretty solid high-definition picture, that will break the mold, but will also then vary the price point pretty dramatically, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, because going back to like economics 101, that almost has to be right. On the other hand, I'm not sure we've seen that yet. I mean, we were talking on the way over about Netflix spending whatever, $12-15 billion a year in production of content. They're not producing amateur content.
No.
They're trying to produce studio quality content because they think they need to do that in order to claim the viewership and the subscribers that they're trying to claim to the service. Now they're not monetizing that in a profitable way yet. And so there are multiple ways to go here in terms of you could have cheaper content, or you could have more content and more choice and try and compete for customers on either one of those bases. And certainly at the mega level, I think you see more competition now for volume of content and not volume of high quality, professionally produced content. YouTube, you could sort of say is 50-50 in the maybe a little bit lesser quality content on YouTube, but there's a lot of now really high professionally produced content on YouTube as well, which suggests that the judgment of the market is you've got to have fantastic quality, production quality content to be competitive in this world.
So Jennifer, let me ask you about that, because so Quibi now is going out to raise another $1 billion, the firm that's producing high quality, short bites of content, if you will, 5-minute shows, Jeff Katzenberg, Meg Whitman. My understanding is they're burning like $6 million a day on production. And they've pushed back the window through which they'll get the appropriate number of advertisers or impressions to make that a break-even or profitable enterprise for the advertisers that attach to their shows. But this is the model that they think is going to break the mold. 5-minute shows that cost extraordinary sums of money to produce.
And I have to be honest, I think it'll be interesting to see, because I have younger children in my household too. I have twins that are 16 and I have a 13-year-old, and I have to be honest, that's all they watch. I mean, they are constantly quoting YouTube to make YouTube performers. I have no idea who these people are, but they love it, and it's the thing that they think I'm so antiquated because I don't watch YouTube. At some point, I am, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
We all are.
Yeah.
We don't live on YouTube.
Right.
Forget about watching it.
That's exactly right.
Right.
I don't use YouTube, sorry. But the reality is that is definitely where content is going. And it'll be interesting to see how the next generation does deal with the advertising, the targeted advertising at them. I don't think they even understand what they're giving to the production companies when they are watching these shows. Because they don't understand the way that the advertising works.
Well, they kind of get it from Instagram, right? Because if there's one place where they see it a lot, it's in an Instagram feed.
That's fair.
Which is just loaded with ads.
That's fair.
Right? How does
But here's another
That's fair.
technology advance from last year, and that is Comcast's new Flex product. So Flex is a service that we are making available only to our high-speed only customers. So it's not, if you're a video customer of Comcast, you can't get Flex. So Flex is a box, little box, and it enables you to access all sorts of online video content with the voice remote. So it's an X1-like experience, but for online over-the-top content. So it's an aggregator of the kind of content that your kids want to watch.
Right.
But it's all aggregated, so you don't have to go, and you can see it on the TV. And you can see it on the computer, too.
So it's easier to watch,
You can
too.
see it on the TV. It's make it easier to watch, to aggregate, and to find that kind of content. So that's another direction. We're not really calling it a video service. It's really an add-on and an adjunct to our high-speed data service. But it's providing our customers with a convenient and easy and efficient way to access this vast amount of video content that's available over the internet, including Netflix, YouTube, and all the over-the-top services we have on X1 are also on Flex.
John, let me come to you on a question of cost, because sports being one of the most expensive things, and again, proliferating like some of these other services we've discussed, you guys ultimately could crash the cost of production, despite the fact that you have multiple cameras at any particular sporting event. The cost of technology has plummeted. The cameras don't cost $200,000 anymore. You can get, as David was suggesting, very high quality production on an iPhone, and we see this on Selena Gomez commercials every day, that Apple's putting out these days. So to the extent that you can bring down the cost of production, does sports become maybe that fulcrum on which the cost question rests or resides, that you can do a lot more for a lot less on the production side relative to the rights side than almost anybody else? Well, I think, along with news, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think it's just sports, but for sports, to your point, we've deployed a lot of technology. We've actually deployed a heavy amount of automation, even in our pre- and post-game shows. I think we're the only RSN in the country doing that, trying to lower overall production cost, increase throughput, putting some process management around it and really trying to change the way we produce content. We've also produced a lot of content in a non-traditional manner at an out-of-home model where most of the production crew stays back at the core facility and just the cameras are out in the field. So we're continually trying to find ways, obviously, to decrease operating costs to frankly lower the pressure on pricing. There's enough pressure in other areas on pricing. But I think you find the same thing in every medium, I mean, there's an enormous appetite for linear content right now. I think 10 years ago, there were 150 television series in production, and this year there are over 500.
Yeah.
Wow.
So interesting that sports
400 have to do with the Kardashians, but that's a whole other.
370,
And
I think it was
Ron
like
would know that.
370.
And Ron would know that because we learned at lunch that he follows the Kardashians.
I do.
That's right.
Because if you follow people with more followers, you yourself get more followers.
So I think, at that point, what it shows you is there's enormous demand for content. And I think, with more and more studios and networks taking back their own content, we talked about this a little at lunch.
I don't know anybody who's done that.
Right, that's some people, right? So between the NBC group, between others, Disney, people like Netflix, I think, will be forced to charge ever harder and pay higher dollars for top line and quality content. So it seems to exacerbate itself. And it's not just in sports, it's across the medium.
Steve, let me talk about one big deal that came up not too long ago. That was the fact that Disney Plus was going to do an exclusive arrangement with Verizon for telephone, or wireless, I should say, customers to get Disney Plus for free for a year. And that's access to the entire slate of Disney offerings when it comes to programming. How impactful is that? What does that mean to everybody else that's going with a new service, whether it's us with Peacock or HBO Max or everybody else that's out there at the moment?
So the honest answer is, I don't think we know. First of all, we still don't know what's on Disney Plus, number one. Number two, we don't really know where the demand for Disney Plus is going to be. Is it going to be on the small screen, whether it's vertical or horizontal? And number three, all of us, I think I can say this for people on the panel, but our whole industry, we're in business for a lot longer than a year. And what happens in a year? So it's for free for a year, but then it goes to what? And how many of those customers do they retain? Or is this just a marketing ploy when there are 5 or 6 substantial over-the-top services that are coming out at the same time, all needing to compete to come out with a big subscriber number to be real as they go forward? So even if this works, and I don't want to be negative because I just don't know enough to be negative, but assuming that it works, the real question is, after a year, what happens to those subscribers? When they have to pay for it, do they all stay? Or is there a 50% churn or a 10% churn or a 70% churn? Because it's the longer run viability and vitality of these services that really matters.
And to a certain extent, Jennifer, Facebook might be a good example of that, is that they toyed with the notion of charging and then walked away.
Right.
Because most everybody would drop it. Or not everybody, but certainly a lot of people would.
And it'll be interesting once Apple's in the market.
Yeah.
I mean, Apple certainly has the capital to be able to create whatever content they want. And once they've stopped giving away the free device, I'm assuming people.
Well, device isn't that free either. So it's the low end is $3.99.
Well, fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's an incentive to come to Apple. You're right. It'll be interesting to see. There's so much competition in the space now to see who will sustain. I'm sure Peacock will.
Well, and there's no mystery to this, but I've been doing this long enough now that I remember when we were an a la carte service and we were a premium. And that was a different business. And it's an incredibly, the panel's point, incredibly marketing intensive, leaky bucket, business where you're pouring them in the top and they're leaking out the bottom all the time. So it's a very challenging model, very different than the video business today.
What's interesting, Ron, is the holy grail for regulators and policymakers has always been competition. With competition solves all evils. But if you think about our business and competition on the content side, competition on the distributor side, if you will, what is interesting is it's unclear from a price perspective whether we're bidding down the price of content or whether we're bidding it up.
Yeah.
And as a result of all this competition, whether we're producing inadvertently higher prices for consumers, at least over a relevant period of time. That's why the short run look at this is really can't be right. You've really got to play this out over a number of years and see how this shakes itself out in terms of the overall impact on the ecosystem and on consumers.
And to that end, I think as a legislator or as a policymaker, I think you are going to watch years of challenges. There definitely is going to be more blackouts because companies are trying to figure out where the ecosystem is going. I think as an operator, we're losing less and less ability to continue to pass through the prices without being obviously transparent about the price increase. But I say that even with that happening, the price is getting so high that it's hard to pass through that price. Yeah. So either we'll have to just not assume the price, or we're going to have to make more of a public stance about the fact that we can't assume all the prices.
David, let me ask you a regulatory question. And in a certain sense, I'm loath to ask this question, but I mean, it's been on my mind for a while. Yeah, we got time.
No, we made it 55 minutes without a regulatory question. That's like a record.
Yeah, that is a record.
That's what I was looking at.
It's usually my first. What was important in 1948 with respect to the movie business?
You're going before I was born.
Okay, well, me too. All right, but as a
I know you have an answer to that question.
I was a film major in college. Right. So there was a consent decree in 1948 that barred production companies from owning studios. And I'm sorry, theaters.
FinCEN.
Theaters.
Oh, this is
pre-FinCEN.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, we've gone to radical vertical integration, in which we're taking back The Office from Netflix at the end of next year. Other producers are taking back their shows from Netflix and are going to run them exclusively on our own services. That was something that's been twice forbidden by regulators.
So let me quibble with you a little bit. Okay. It's not like that we took back The Office.
Okay, the contract ran out.
To be fair about what happened here is, I mean, I think everyone in this audience knows this, but we don't own those shows.
Understood.
I mean, the production companies, the actors, they all own those shows. And so for The Office, there was a competitive process. Netflix got to bid as to whether they were going to keep that programming. We got to bid as to whether we were going to take that programming away. We won the bid. So it's not like we just said, okay, we're not going to run The Office on Netflix anymore. There was a bid with a lot of money moving around as to who was going to have the exclusive rights to The Office. I think that's different than the vertical. That's not really vertical integration. Yeah. That's the competitive market at the level of the production companies and the production being able to take advantage of the downstream market of multiple competitors now interested in bidding for content, where in the past there may have only been one or two competitors. Now there are multiple competitors. It really goes to the point I made just before. It's a higher price point now that the production companies, the actors, the owners of the content are able to get as a result of the more intense competition at a different level of the ecosystem.
But Jennifer, still, I mean, at the end of the day, it's highly unlikely that Disney's going to sell programs to Peacock, or Peacock is going to sell programs to Disney Plus, or HBO Max is going to be cross-selling. So when you do get, though, those vertical streams, does that present a regulatory issue that may rear its head at some juncture in the future?
I mean, it's a fair question. I mean, the reality is it has had antitrust implications. Historically, there are antitrust implications. I think David's point is well made. There's so much competition now. I think we're far away from that being the case right now, but I do think what it'll do, it'll help streamline the industry. Not everyone can afford that kind of content. And that's the reality. You're not going to have as many providers long term because not everybody can afford the content. The price of the content is going to be so high. It's going to limit how many over-the-tops can you actually have.
That's the consolidation we talked about last year.
So who buys Netflix then?
Somebody with deep pockets.
Right.
Yeah. Do you guys think that's going to happen and ultimately there'll be consolidation of services?
But there's already been consolidation.
No, I know. I mean, it's been going on for our whole lives.
So I think it's going on. I think there'll continue to be consolidation. I don't know that Netflix or Disney or Warner Media or NBC Universal are going to be the participants in that consolidation. But you know, you've got CBS, Viacom, you've got Scripps, you've got Lionsgate, you've got Sony. There are a lot of content producers out there that are of a size where they do present consolidation options.
And Jennifer, we also got distributors now who are global in nature as well. I mean, Comcast having taken on Sky, we've got a whole host of others who are now global, not just local.
Yep.
What does that mean to this whole proposition?
It's a great question too. I mean, over time, I think there'll be more consolidation in that space too. I think I think a lot of this is going to play out over an extended period of time, though. I don't think any of this is a short term. I think there's just too much, in all honesty, excitement and enthusiasm in this space holistically. It's definitely still an expanding space. But I do think David's right. I think long term, this is going to be an evolving space. I think pulling in the international play, you can definitely have more consolidation, but everybody in the room knows, it's a complicated business, it's an expensive business to be in. So again, it's just going to take time for all of this to play out.
And Sean, your view on this? I mean, it's interesting because some of our sports are going global and some global sports are coming to the United States.
Right.
So again, that's raising not only the amount of available content, but also increasing the amount of competition for eyeballs when it comes to, I mean, cricket is now seen in the United States, something that you would have never imagined 5, 10 years ago, right?
Well, there's been an explosion of sports content, obviously, and that's why you're seeing it driven down to lower and lower levels, right? I mean, again, a decade ago, maybe half of the college content that was on today would have been active. Now virtually every college game, every professional game certainly is on. And people are starting to look at it differently, right? And it's going to be more about impressions and total impressions. And back to your earlier point, on digital platforms and elsewhere, right? On content that's aggregated digitally as well as on the linear platforms. So I think, it'll be challenging to figure out how to continue to distribute that content on every platform and make it cost effective on every platform, to everyone's earlier point. I think it's really challenging. I mean, rights fees rise, competition is increasing. It's exactly the same in the broadcast world and for any other type of traditional programming. So you've got to find new ways to distribute that content to lower your overall expenses and not block out whole segments. And I do think eventually we'll come to the point where we'll have to figure out how to distribute some of this linear content directly to consumers. And I don't know when we'll get there. If you're Disney or you're NBC and you have a large portfolio of evergreen content, very different than being a sports network, right? 99.5% of our viewership is live in real time.
Right.
That's the type of content. Even though there are a half a point of people who will watch that game later, most of them want to watch it in real time. We'll have to figure out a way to service those people, get to them, and give them that content, even if it's outside the traditional distribution stream. Yeah. But we'll have to do it in conjunction with all our existing partners, to continue to move that business forward. But that's, I think, a tricky Rubicon that's got to be overcome.
Yeah. Jennifer, before we get to our final question that David so loves, the wrap-up question for this panel, I just want to ask you one thing, because I've skipped this entirely, and that is the role of the wireless carriers, the phone companies, and all of this. We almost always talk about them in depth, and aside from Verizon and Disney teaming up, you've got AT&T now officially in the game,
right?
And some of the others still looking either to consolidate and or play.
Right.
What do you see their role going forward?
Oh, I think, as in the wireless carriers, I think they're just going to add to the competition. I mean, I think that industry is going to do nothing but expand. I think a lot of people, most people have a wireless phone and that's all they have. I think more and more content's going to go to the phone. I think those are some very large companies that can continue to buy content. I think they're going to be big players in the long term. I don't know, David may not agree, but I see them being
There were years, David, where we laughed them off in a certain sense because they could not get their content act together.
I never laugh off anyone with the tens of billions of dollars of free cash flow that the wireless carriers have. So, but I'll rephrase your question a little bit. I think 5G will be an inevitability, but I'm not sure what 5G really means to our businesses. I think the notion that 5G as a mobile cell phone application and service is going to change the world of cellular service. I don't know that 5G is going to change the world of our in-home and in-business high-speed data service because I'm not going to give a whole lecture on this, but different types of spectrum with different propagating factors. Some reach a long distance, Some go a short distance but have better propagation features. All need backhaul.
Yeah.
By the way, who's the best entity to provide backhaul? That would be cable.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those businesses where we're a pretty important part of the solution, and so it's not something, at least today, that I think is a huge threat to our ongoing businesses.
All right, so with the final minute and a half that we have, I'll come down the line, Sean. I'll start with you. This is a question we often ask is, if we, the three of us, four of us, gathered again a year from now, what do you think will be maybe the most important development that will have taken place?
Well, again, I think you'll see some more technology platforms rolling out, hopefully more 4K content. With any luck, in the next 12 or 18 months, we'll light up our 4K platform. Certainly, there'll be more gaming and gaming broadcasts on air. I think for sure you'll see.
No black holes for Fortnite?
I don't know, but I mean, I do think, you know, everyone and certainly everyone in the sports industry is looking at it. I think it's a way to increase engagement especially for a young male audience. Something like 40% of U.S. wagering population is 18 to 34 males. So since they're already
The very people who could afford it, yes.
well, again, people who are engaged in that and engaged in that content and want to see it, and you'll probably see alternate broadcasts developed exactly for that audience for sure. You know, and with any luck, you know, certainly next year will bring us another Stanley Cup and World Series victory to Boston. So we'll be looking for both of those.
Not after the Yankees buy Garrett Cole. Jennifer.
Wow, that was a lot. I was actually going to say gaming too. I mean, Cox has already invested in 2 different gaming companies. I mean, it is a growing business. Gaming is the thing that the young people want to do, and it is a new avenue. And you're right, that the statistics for the young males participating in gaming, it's mind-boggling to me.
And you're talking esports, not just wagering, correct?
I apologize. I am talking esports. Yes, I think that's going to be a huge. It's going to continue to grow. I think the home automation market's going to continue to grow. I mean, I can't imagine that we're going to have that many more home automation devices, but I think everybody's going to continue to invest in home automation. And I think small cell is going to make a difference, but I think small cell is going to make a difference more for like the automated car space. I think that's going to be where you see changes for 5G and for the 5G technology. I don't see it in the world of our space right now. I don't think we're there yet, but I do see it in the car industry.
And David?
So I think I'm going to go with the easy one, which is I think a year from now, we'll have 4 or 5 new over-the-top or direct-to-consumer businesses out there. I think we'll know a lot more about pricing, about customer demand, and I think that we'll be able to have a better discussion about the future of video delivery content in the fast-moving and technologically moving world in which we'll be functioning.
And I'll still have my job next year?
You'll still have your job next year.
Thank you very much.
By the way, that is the final question every year.
Every year, yes. David, Jennifer, Sean, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time to watch here at NECTA's 51st annual gathering. Thanks for being with us, and as far as I know, I'll see you next year.